Naturally, they were all speaking highly of him, expressing their surprise and fear, but that didn't quite assuage his paranoia. Aints looked down at the pearl-white hair. Yes, he was mounted atop the wise king of the forest. All the passers-by were amazed at the majestic wise king of the forest, though Aints had his doubts on that point. They were saying things like, "My, what a noble magical beast that warrior is riding." Aints wondered if he should be proud. He knew he should. Everyone was saying what a splendid magical beast the wise king of the forest was, but Aints felt like he was on some kind of sketchy game show. The closest thing he could think of was an older man riding a merry-go-round with no girlfriend or family, looking straight ahead and deadly serious. Knowing how to ride a horse was no help at all. The hamster S shape was entirely different. Aints had his butt stuck out and his legs spread wide. He couldn't keep his balance unless he assumed perfect gymnastics vaulting form. Obviously, it hadn't been his idea to ride the monster. The Swords of Darkness and the wise king of the forest herself had suggested it. Then Narbril chimed in that a ruler shouldn't have to walk, so he found himself thinking it might not be that bad. How wrong he was. He shouldn't have gone along with this. It was like someone set a trap for him. Riding a hamster was like something out of a fairy tale. That would have been fine if he'd been a little kid or maybe a woman, but that was a stretch. It certainly didn't suit a robust warrior in full plate armor, but everyone said he was the weird one for thinking that. Was his sense of aesthetics off, or was it theirs? Or maybe the whole world's? Needless to say, the answer was clear. If the majority of people said something was beautiful and Aints felt otherwise, then it had to be Aints' sense of aesthetics that had gone haywire. That was why he couldn't put up a proper resistance to the idea of riding the wise king of the forest. Especially if doing it would distinguish him and help Momon the adventurer carve out a sturdy position in the social order of this world. Still, why the humiliation play? His mind would usually suppress any emotional wave of a certain strength, but there wasn't any sign of that happening. In other words, he wasn't feeling too humiliated, a fact that taught him something about himself. If I have a high tolerance for shame, that means, could I be a brilliant masochist? I always thought I was more of a sadist, but well, we made it back to the city, so the request is fulfilled. Peter and Enfira were talking, oblivious to Aints as he agonized over his kinks, while comparing his current mental state to the videos and images he had collected. Yes, you right, request complete. So the agreed-upon reward has already been arranged, but I'd like to give you the extra reward I mentioned in the forest. Could you come with me to my shop? Behind Enfira, the cart was crammed full of medicinal herbs. Not only that, but there was also tree bark, strange fruits hanging from the branches of the tree, mushrooms that seemed bigger than Enfira's arms could get around, and long grasses, i.e., a whole bunch of miscellaneous loot. For someone not in the know, it looked like just a pile of plants, but for someone with the right knowledge, it was a sparkling mountain of treasure. They made such a haul because the wise king of the forest, at Aints' command, had escorted them around her territory. This allowed them to gather things safely. In return for the extremely rare herbs and other useful potion ingredients, Enfira had promised them all a handsome bonus on top of the original reward. Okay, Momon, you ray off to the Adventurers Guild, right? Oh, right. Any magical beast in the city needs to be registered at the guild, huh? It's a pain, but that's how it is. What's the plan? We defeated those ogres, so should we all go and collect for that too? No, Momon held our hands through every step of this trip. Let us go to Enfira's place and at least help him unload the herbs and whatnot. If we don't do some work, I feel bad taking an equal share of the reward. The Swords of Darkness nodded in agreement, but Enfira tried to politely decline. Oh, you don't need to, well, there's the extra reward you promised us too, so just consider it a favor. Peter was so casual about it that Enfira gave in to their kindness. Okay then, I'll give you guys a discount when you buy potions at my shop. Wow, that's awesome. Okay, Momon will go to Enfira's after he swings by the guild, and the rest of us will go straight to Enfira's, help out with odds and ends, and then head to the guild to settle up. We'll apply for the ogre compensation, then we can pick up the reward tomorrow. So I am sorry to trouble you, but do you think you could meet us at the guild again tomorrow? Around the same time as when we first met? Sure thing, that was just what Aints wanted to hear. He managed to nonchalantly ask how beast registration worked. but he was glad he was able to avoid the situation of having to ask them to read or write for him if they had come. There was a chance that something like that would make all his efforts so far come to nothing. Okay, see you later then. With a shallow bow of his head, Aints, still riding the wise king of the forest, accompanied by Narbarl, took leave of the Swords of Darkness and proceeded to the guild. Once they were far enough away, Narbarl sidled up to him and asked with some suspicion in her voice, "Are you sure it's okay to trust them like that? I am fine with it. Even if they betrayed us, all we lose is the reward for the ogres. I imagine we lose more if we obsessed about such a small sum and gave the impression we were greedy." Aints had come to this city to get famous. Having a reputation as petty would be a huge hurdle to his plans. A warrior may not be able to eat, but he'll still pick his teeth. Remembering that saying, Aints put a hand in his pocket and fingered the small pouch containing his change. It was flat as a pancake. He couldn't feel much of anything hard inside, so it was depressingly easy to tell how little it contained. It was still enough to get 2 people a room for the night. If they had needed to pay for food, they would have come up short. But Aints was undead, and Narbarl wore a ring that made eating and drinking unnecessary for her, so they were able to save quite a bit of money. The idea behind having one of her rings be something so boring was to take precaution against poison, but it ended up coming in handy in this unexpected way. This thing eats, Aints was thinking, looking down at the wise king of the forest. Then Narbarl continued their conversation. "It would be strange for a supreme being such as yourself to cling to such a paltry sum. Please excuse my lack of thought, Lord Aints." Aints grunted a response and fingered the pouch again. His spine wasn't breaking into a cold sweat, but it sure felt like it was. Why am I making things harder than they need to be? And again with the Lord Aints, whatever Narbarl, it's fine. As long as nobody is listening, I don't care. Aints was inwardly slumping as Narbarl chattered on cheerfully. "Oh yeah, those crane flies were bowing down before your awesome power, my lord. I hardly think they were bowing down. So modest, Lord Aints. I am sure that ogres and the like are below worms in your eyes, but you still put on a display of first-class swordsmanship for us." I was impressed. Aints could feel the wise king of the forest trembling strangely beneath him. Ignoring that, he said that, "I was just swinging it around. One-hit kill made him sound good, but really, he wasn't. The motions of Gazef in the battle he witnessed earlier had a flow to them." Meanwhile, when Aints thought back on his motions, they were as lame as a kid recklessly swinging around a sword. Everyone's praise was only due to the overpowering destructive power that stemmed from his extraordinary physical power. His technique was nothing compared to that of a real warrior like Gazef Stronov. He hadn't expected to move like an actual warrior, so why not use magic to become a warrior? Wearing armor, Aints was capable of using 5 spells. One of them would take his level as a caster and make that exact number his warrior level. In other words, Aints could temporarily become a level 100 warrior. There were pros to this, like being able to use gear that only certain classes could use, but naturally there were also big cons. For starters, during that time, he wouldn't be able to use any magic. Also, while he would become a warrior, he wouldn't acquire all the warrior skills, and the recalculation of his ability points would place him lower than a warrior who had been one from the beginning. Essentially, he'd be transformed into a half-assed warrior. Maybe he'd be able to defeat a priest knight or other quasi-warrior class in a sword fight, but against someone who collected pure warrior classes, it was doubtful. Still, he'd be far stronger than he was right now. The problem was there were too many drawbacks. If he was suddenly assaulted by another warrior and couldn't use any magic for even a short amount of time, he would undoubtedly be defeated. Even if he could use a scroll and cast a spell that way, considering the amount of preparation that takes, he'd be at too big of a disadvantage. At the present time, when they didn't know if there were enemy players out there, he couldn't let his guard down. There was no point in going to the trouble to use that magic just to give himself a weak point. Well, this warrior thing is just an act to hide who I really am, so it's probably not worth getting so upset about. The wise king of the forest jumped with a gasp and turned to look up at Aints. "I've been listening to your conversation. You're not really a warrior." Aints looked her in her black eyes and answered in the negative with a confident shake of his head. Narbarl explained, her voice oozing superiority. Lord Aints is just pretending to be a warrior. It was like a game. If he used his true power, he would rend the heavens and split the earth. Faced with her absolute faith, her belief that he was capable of so much, Aints couldn't say no, that would never happen. Yeah, pretty much. You're lucky you didn't have to fight me for real, wise king of the forest. If you had, you probably wouldn't have survived more than a second. Is that so, master? Hamusuk will be even more loyal to you, Hamusuk. That was the first thing that popped into Aints' mind when the wise king of the forest asked him for a name. He'd given it to her at that moment, and the wise king of the forest was happy with it, but he realized it was totally lame. Yes, Hamusuk was a hasty decision. Creampuff would have been more witty. Even all my old guildmates used to tell me I had no sense for names. So it was that Aints, full of regret, trundled along to the Adventurers Guild atop the wise king of the forest, also known as Hamusuk. Enfira pulled the cart around to the rear of the house and parked right outside the back entrance. He hopped out of the driver's box carrying a lantern lit with magic. Then he unlocked and opened the door. He banished the darkness of the room inside by hanging the lantern on the wall. Several barrels appeared in its glow. The smell of dried herbs coming from them indicated this room was used to store medicinal herbs. Okay then. Sorry to trouble you, but do you mind carrying in the herbs? The Swords of Darkness gave a willing reply. They carefully took the bundles of herbs off the cart and put them in the storage room. As Enfira gave directions on where to deposit each item, he had a strange feeling. Grandma must not be here. She was getting on in years, but her eyes and ears were still sharp. She should have heard them clattering around and come in to greet them. That said, when she was focused on making potions, she didn't let little noises interrupt her. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, so he didn't raise his voice to call her. It wasn't long before all the bundles of herbs had been put in the appropriate places. The Swords of Darkness were looking a little out of breath. You must be tired. There should be some cold fruit water in the main building. Would you like some before you leave? Sounds great, said Luckrut happily. A few beads of sweat stood out on his forehead. The other Swords of Darkness nodded their agreement. Right this way, then. Just as Enfira turned to lead them to the main building, the door across the room opened. There you are. Welcome home. Standing there was a cute woman, but there was something troubling about her. Her short golden hair swung with each step she took. I was so worried about you. You were just gone. What horrible timing you have. I've been waiting this whole time, wondering when you get back. Who might you be? You don't know her? Peter yelped, surprised they were on at least acquaintance terms given the woman's familiar tone of voice. I am here to kidnap you. I want you to use the spell Undead Army to summon a legion of zombies, so come be my pawn, pretty please. Sensing the malicious mood, the Swords of Darkness immediately drew their weapons. She kept talking even as they all assumed fighting stances. A 7th tier spell. It's tricky for a plain old person to use, but doable with a crown of wisdom. Furthermore, though it's impossible to control all the undead that are summoned with it, they can be led. Perfect plan, don't you think? Awesome, right? Enfira, get back. Get away from here, said Peter in a hard voice, focused on the woman with his sword at the ready. She's rambling on and on because she's certain she can kill us. So as long as you ray her aim, the only thing that can change the current situation is you running away. When Enfira panicked and fell back, the Swords of Darkness formed a wall in front of him. Ninja, you should also fall back, Dine shouted, and then Luckrut spoke up as well. Take the kid and run for it. You have something you need to do. It doesn't seem like we'll be able to help you, but we can at least buy you some time. But oh, your story's a real tearjerker, huh? You're going to make me cry, yes. But I can have you running away on me. I want to play with at least one of you. She laughed delightedly at Ninja as he bit his lip in hesitation and slowly pulled a stiletto out from under her robe. As if timed for that moment, the door on the other side of the room opened, and a man who looked like a sickly pale, bony undead appeared. The Swords of Darkness' faces turned grim when they realized they were caught in a pincer. You've played enough. Oh, what do you mean, card? You made it so no one outside will hear their screams, right? Can I play with at least one? Her toothy grin sent chills up Enfira's spine. Well, there's nowhere to run now, so let us get to it, shall we? The actual registering of Hamusuk went smoothly enough, but they got caught up for an hour and a half. The part that took the longest was the sketch the time it took to draw Hamusuk. It would have been faster if they'd used magic, but Aints would have had to cover the fee, so he passed. Of course, he didn't want to seem tight-fisted, so he came up with a random excuse. It's too late now, but saying I am interested in drawing was a bit forced, he said. Well, whatever. So now we head to Enfira, he asked Narbril in front of the guild after the registration was taken care of. Then he went over to Hamusuk. He was already used to it. Or rather, the merry-go-round wasn't just for lovers and families. What was wrong with solitary older men getting on? Aints no longer cared what anybody thought. Making full use of his high physical ability, he sprang onto the wise king of the forest with movements as graceful as a celebrated gymnast. He had neither saddle nor harness, but his few hours of experience had turned him into a fine equestrian. The passers-by who witnessed the spectacle oohed and ahed. Some women even squealed. The looks from adventurers were particularly intense and incredulous once they checked the plate hanging around his neck. He couldn't believe it. What happened to your concept of aesthetics? He grumbled in his head. He was about to give the order to depart when a voice called out to stop him. Say, aren't you the one who went to gather herbs with my grandson? He turned toward the elderly-sounding voice and found an old woman standing in the road. Who are you? Already had a guess. If what she said was true, then there was only one person she could be. My name is Lizzie Baylor. I am Enfira's grandmother. Oh, so it is you. As you say, I escorted Enfira to Khan. I am Momon. And this is Nabe bowed, and Lizzie smiled at her. What a beauty, I can hardly believe my eyes. And what is this magical beast you are riding? This is the wise king of the forest, Hamusuk. I am Hamusuk, I am, and very pleased to meet you. What? This mighty beast is the wise king of the forest. Lizzie's shout caused all the eavesdropping adventurers to look even more surprised. They voiced their shock among themselves. Is that really the legendary magical beast? She said it was. We ran into her while gathering herbs. I forced her to surrender. While the wise king of the forest, she was seeing stars. So where is my grandson now? He took the herbs and went home a little while ago. We were actually on our way to your place to pick up our reward. The old woman was visibly relieved to hear that. Then, with a strange look in her eye, she said, Oh, I see why Don we go together then. I am very interested in hearing about your adventure. Her offer was music to Aints' ears. Gladly, Lizzie guided the group through the streets of Rantle. Okay, let us go in. They arrived at the shop, and Lizzie took the key out in front of the door when she cocked her head. She pushed, and the door opened silently without any resistance. That boy, so careless, she grumbled as she entered, and Aints and Narbril followed. Enfira, hey, Momones here, she shouted toward the back, but a deep quiet reigned over the shop. There was no sign anyone was there. Where could he be? Aints gave a short answer to the puzzled query. Well, this is trouble. Ignoring the uncomprehending Lizzie, he placed his hands on the hilts of his great swords. Narbril knew immediately what that meant and removed the sheaths. What is it? Just follow me. With that curt reply, he fully drew his swords, gripped them properly, and strode toward the back of the shop. He threw open the door and turned right down the hallway. He was in a stranger's house, but there was no hesitation in his footsteps. When he came to the door at the end of the hallway, it took a moment for Lizzie to catch up. Then he asked her, what's behind this door? It's where we store the herbs, and the back door is there too. She didn't know what had happened, but she could tell something was wrong. Aints ignored her and opened the door. The smell that assaulted their noses was not medicinal herbs, but something more foul, the stench of blood. Peter and Luckrat were near the door. Dine was farther away. And Ninja was all the way in the back. All four were slumped against a wall. Their legs were splayed, and their arms flopped limply at their sides. A puddle of dark blood covered the floor. It looked like every drop in their bodies had been bled out. What in the? Lizzie tottered toward the threshold in shock, but Aints held her back by the shoulders and entered swiftly ahead of her. All of a sudden, Peter began to make a jerky attempt to stand. But a great sword sliced through the air, faster than he could react. Peter's head landed with a thump and rolled across the floor. Then, as Luckrat was trying to get up, the sword returned in one fluid motion to slice off his head as well. Lizzie could hardly believe the horrors occurring before her eyes. Dine managed to get upright. The face he turned to them did not look like the face of a living thing. From its bloodless pallor, clouded eyes stared them down. There was a hole in his forehead. One glance was enough to tell it had been fatal. There was only one reason the dead would walk. They'd been turned into undead. Zombies, Lizzie screamed. Dine lurched toward them with a hostile groan. Aints hastily stabbed with his great sword. The huge blade went through Dine's neck. His destabilized head wobbled loosely as he sank to the floor. No one moved anymore. In the silence, Aints looked at Ninja in the back. She didn't so much as twitch. Enfirer, it finally dawned on Lizzie what had happened. She ran off to look for her grandson. Aints glanced at her briefly before turning to Nabril with an order. Guard her. My passive skill, Immortal Blessing, doesn't detect anything, so we can assume there aren't any more undead around, but there may be some live enemies hidden somewhere. Understood. Nabril gave a quick nod and ran after Lizzie. After seeing that both of them were gone, Aints turned his attention back to Ninja.